Residents woke up trapped, and the sheriff said he couldn't help them. I came home to claim the 840 acres my uncle left me, only to find an HOA gate welded across my own driveway. They said they owned everything, including the road I drove in on. But when I uncovered the truth, one signature at a time, this whole community learned who really controlled their land. Stick with me. This one gets wild. If you've ever stood up to something that felt bigger than you, drop a justice in the comments, and hit subscribe for more real land rights battles told straight from the heartland. I turned off Highway 93 and followed the old dirt spur toward my uncle's ranch, the same road I'd traveled 100 times as a kid. The land looked the same: scrub pines, broken fence posts, the stretch of hills rolling into the horizon. But everything felt heavier now. My uncle was gone, and the deed in my glove compartment meant the 840 acres were mine to protect. I expected grief, maybe a quiet moment on the porch. What I didn't expect was a steel barrier slicing across my driveway like a military checkpoint. A brand new metal gate, polished, welded, drilled into concrete, stood where nothing had ever stood before. Hanging dead center was a bright orange violation notice stamped with the words, Maple Canyon HOA, non-compliant property access. I killed the engine and stepped out. Dust rose around my boots, and irritation rose with it. The HOA had never been within 10 miles of this ranch. My uncle despised anyone who tried telling him what he could do with his land. Yet here was a structure that looked like it belonged in a gated community, not on Parker ground. Before I could take 2 steps toward the gate, a silver SUV rolled up behind me, tires crunching. A woman climbed out, mid-40s, perfect posture, blazer crisp as if she ironed it in the car. She carried herself like someone used to winning arguments before they began. "Good afternoon," she said, every syllable sharpened to a point. "I'm Madeline Sharp, HOA president." I stared at her, then at the gate, then back at her. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" "It should," she replied. "This entrance now falls under Maple Canyon HOA jurisdiction. All properties within our radius must comply with community standards." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, this is Parker Ranch. Has been since 1952. Madeline produced a clipboard like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. "According to Section 14C of our expansion ordinance, your driveway intersects a designated HOA boundary. Therefore, you must remove non-compliant structures, vehicles, and livestock immediately." There was no mistaking it. She was serious. I stepped closer to the gate. "You installed this without permission." She smiled as if she were indulging a confused child. "We don't need permission. We have authority." That word, authority, hit harder than it should have, not because she had any, but because she believed she did. I folded my arms. "And who told you Parker Ranch was inside your HOA?" Madeline flipped through her clipboard. "Our survey department." "Well, your survey department is wrong." A pause. Madeline's eyes drifted to my truck window, where a corner of the estate transfer envelope stuck out of the visor. She saw my uncle's name, Parker Benjamin, and for the first time her confidence slipped. Just for a heartbeat, a tightening around the jaw, a small inhale, a flicker of something like fear. "You inherited the property?" she asked. "Yesterday," I said. "Signed, sealed, and recorded." Her posture stiffened. She recovered quickly, but I'd already seen it, the moment her certainty cracked. Madeline cleared her throat and reattached her smile. "Well, that doesn't change your obligations. New owners still fall under HOA guidance." I stepped toward the gate and tugged on the metal frame. Solid, overbuilt, meant to send a message. "Let me make sure I understand," I said. "You're telling me that my own ranch, land my family has owned longer than your HOA has existed, is suddenly part of your radius?" And I'm required to follow your rules? That's correct. And if I don't? She pointed at the violation notice. Escalating fines, enforcement actions, legal consequences. I looked her dead in the eye. How is my ranch part of your HOA? Madeline didn't answer. Not really. She just stared back at me, calculating, like she was trying to decide how much I knew or how much she should fear. Her silence said more than any explanation could. I reached for the violation notice and ripped it off the gate. Her eyes twitched at the gesture. Good. This is Parker land, I said. And until you show me a single legal document that says otherwise, you take this gate off my property. Madeline stepped backward, lips tight. We'll be in touch, Mr. Parker. She returned to her SUV. The tires spun gravel as she drove off, faster than she arrived. I turned back to the gate, gripping the cold metal. Something was wrong. Madeline Sharp didn't panic because I challenged her authority. She panicked because of the name Parker, because she recognized it, because she knew something I didn't. And if she was afraid of the man who now owned this land, I needed to find out why. I climbed back into my truck, reached up to the visor, and pulled down the certified envelope she'd reacted to. Parker Estate Transfer stamped across the top. The paper still smelled like the county clerk's office. Ink, dust, and old files. Nothing about it should have rattled a seasoned HOA president. Yet when Madeline saw my uncle's name, her mask slipped. I replayed that moment in my mind as I tore open the seal and unfolded the letter again, looking for any detail I might have missed. Nothing unusual. Just the official notice of transfer. The deed number. Parcel boundaries. But the boundaries, my boundaries, ran far wider than I remembered as a kid. 840 acres, all continuous. No carve-outs, no easements listed, no exceptions. So how the hell did an HOA think they had jurisdiction over any part of it? Before I could go deeper into the paperwork, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind me. Deputy Carson Briggs stepped out, one hand resting on his duty belt, not in threat, but in habit. Briggs was one of the few lawmen my uncle trusted, honest, straightforward, but even he looked cautious as he approached the gate. Cole, he said, chin lifting in greeting. Heard you were back. I also heard something about an altercation with Maple Canyon HOA. Altercation? I asked. She put a gate across my driveway. Briggs exhaled slowly. Yeah, they've been expanding their jurisdiction, claiming land that's not theirs. We've had complaints all year. And you can't remove this? I asked, tapping the steel frame. He shook his head. Civil matter. Technically, they're allowed to install structures on disputed boundaries until ownership is clarified. Clarified? I repeated. There's no dispute. This is Parker land. Briggs offered a sympathetic shrug. Then you'll need paperwork to prove it. I held up the estate envelope. Like this? He studied the documents briefly, then nodded. This helps, but you'll want to check your uncle's old records. Ben kept everything. If the HOA's pulling something, he probably saw it coming. The words saw it coming hit harder than I expected. My uncle never trusted outsiders, least of all developers and HOAs. For him to leave a trail, that meant he expected a fight. Anything else I should know? I asked. Briggs hesitated. The HOA's attorney, Trent Holloway, he's aggressive. And Madeline? She's not just running an HOA. She runs it like a private kingdom. Be careful. I thanked him, climbed back into the truck, and headed toward the ranch house. The tires crunched over gravel that felt more like familiar ground than anything had since the funeral. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, I felt the shift. This wasn't just my inheritance. It was a battlefield my uncle had prepared me for. Inside, dust coated the dining table, but the office door was spotless, recently wiped. as if my uncle wanted the next person who opened it to see his work clearly. I flicked on the light. A metal filing cabinet stood against the wall, dented and worn but locked. On top sat a single envelope with my name written in my uncle's shaky last-year handwriting. "If the HOA ever shows up, open this." My chest tightened. I tore it open. Inside lay a folded note and a thin brass key. "Cole, if Maple Canyon comes knocking, it means they crossed a line, literally. Don't trust their maps, don't trust their lawyers, check the bottom drawer, and don't let them scare you. This land remembers who owns it." Ben. My pulse kicked up. I moved to the filing cabinet, inserted the key into the bottom drawer, and turned it. The lock clicked with startling force, like something meant to stay hidden until absolutely necessary. Inside the drawer was a bundle of old documents tied with twine. Deeds, surveys, correspondence stamped with county seals from the early 90s. But the first item on top made my breath stall. A faded manila folder labeled Maple Canyon, Prior Claims. I opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn survey dated 1994. My uncle's familiar notations circled parcels with red ink, marking out entire housing tracts now occupied by HOA residents. But the red boundary? It encompassed all of them. Every house, every cul-de-sac, every exclusive community feature. All of it. Squarely on Parker land. A chill ran up my spine. Not fear, not excitement, but recognition. This was why Madeline panicked. The HOA's jurisdiction was built on sand, and she knew it. I flipped through the rest of the folder. Letters from the county warning that preliminary development plans had been denied. Notices that Maple Canyon's proposed expansion overlapped private property. A final letter. Development may not proceed unless landowner Parker grants easement or sale. But my uncle never granted either. He simply said nothing. I sat back in the office chair, the leather cracked and cold. My uncle had fought this silently for decades, not in courtrooms or with arguments, just by holding the line and waiting for someone to inherit the fight. The stakes hit me all at once. This wasn't a petty HOA dispute. This wasn't about a gate. This was about an entire community built on a lie. And the moment Madeline Sharp realized the land had passed to me, someone who might actually dig into the paperwork, she'd lost her composure. I stared at the 1994 survey again. If this was real, Maple Canyon didn't just trespass. They existed illegally. Every home, every road, every inch. A knock echoed through the front door. Sharp, firm, not friendly. I froze, listening. A woman's voice called out, "Mr. Parker, we need to discuss your compliance." Madeline was back already, which meant she was desperate. I closed the drawer, pocketed the brass key, and walked toward the door, knowing now that the power in this situation wasn't on her side. It was in my hands, and she knew it. I opened the front door only halfway, blocking her from seeing the office behind me. Madeline Sharp stood on the porch, arms crossed, chin lifted like she owned the place. Two HOA board members hovered behind her, clipboard carriers, the kind who followed orders without understanding them. "Mr. Parker," she said, tone clipped, "we need to clarify something about your compliance status." "Funny," I replied. "I was just clarifying something myself." Her eyes flicked past me again, searching for what I might be hiding. Even her breathing was tight, measured. She was off balance, and she hated it. "We've had some confusion," she continued. "It appears there may be discrepancies in our mapping of this region. I'd like to review your property records to—" "No," I said simply. She blinked. "No? You don't get to review anything here, especially not today." Her jaw tightened. "Cole, refusing cooperation with an HOA investigation can lead to fines or—" "This isn't an HOA property." The statement stiffened the two men behind her. One whispered something she ignored. Madeline straightened her blazer. Our records indicate Parker Ranch falls within. Your records are wrong, I said, stepping past her and onto the porch. And I can prove it. She froze. That was the first moment she realized the ground under her wasn't just unstable. It was disappearing. I'm busy, I added. Unless you have a warrant or a deed with my uncle's signature on it, you can leave. She swallowed her retort and signaled her board members. They backed away, tension radiating off them. We'll reconvene, she said, her voice brittle. This isn't over. You're right, I said. It's just starting. Madeline turned and walked briskly toward her SUV. This time, she didn't look back. I locked the door and hurried back to the office. The single desk lamp cast a harsh circle of light over the documents. I spread out the surveys, deeds, and letters across the table, using old whiskey glasses as paperweights. Every line of every map reinforced the same truth. The Maple Canyon development sat deep inside Parker boundaries. Not by an inch or two, not a surveying mistake, but entire rows of homes, streets, sidewalks, even their community park. The red boundary line my uncle had drawn wasn't subtle. It was a warning. I needed confirmation. I gathered the documents into a folder and drove straight to the county building. Ruby Hale, the clerk, recognized me immediately when I walked in. She'd known my uncle for decades. Cole, she said, coming around the counter. I was expecting you. Expecting me? That stopped me cold. She gestured to the back office. Let's talk. We sat across from each other as I laid the documents between us. Ruby adjusted her glasses, scanning the old maps with growing concern. Good Lord, she whispered. Ben kept all of this? He told me to open it only if the HOA showed up. Ruby let out a humorless laugh. Then he always knew. Knew what exactly? I asked. She turned her monitor toward me, pulling up the county's digital parcel maps. With a few keystrokes, she overlaid the 1994 survey. The HOA development lit up across the screen. Streets, homes, cul-de-sacs. Then the boundary overlay appeared. And there it was. A perfect match. Ruby exhaled slowly. Cole, these houses shouldn't even exist on your uncle's property. What happened? I asked. Why wasn't this stopped? Ruby leaned back, rubbing her temples. Back in the early 90s, Maple Canyon submitted an expansion plan. The county denied it because it overlapped Parker land. They were supposed to resurvey, refile, and get approval. They never did. And then construction started anyway. And the county didn't intervene? They filed notices, lots of them. She tapped the monitor. But your uncle never responded. That surprised me. He ignored them? Not ignored. He refused to engage. He told the county, if they want my land, they can come talk to me directly. They never did. And they just built anyway? Developers do their own inspections and certifications. If they had decided to stamp their own documents, it could have bypassed county oversight for a while. And the HOA? Most HOAs don't check underlying land ownership, she said. They assume the developer secured all rights. I stared at the screen. A whole community built illegally, and they had the nerve to put a gate across my driveway. What do I do now? I asked. Ruby folded her hands. Document everything. Don't confront them without legal counsel, and find someone who can interpret these surveys properly. You're sitting on a powder keg, Cole. I nodded. The truth was loud and undeniable. If these documents held up, Maple Canyon HOA had no authority, no legal standing, nothing but fabricated lines on a map designed to pressure landowners into compliance, which meant their gate, their fines, their jurisdiction, all of it was built on a lie. I drove back to the ranch, the weight of the discovery pressing on my chest like a stone. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part knew how dangerous this was. People didn't just let millions in property value evaporate without a fight. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw headlights glaring against the steel gate. 3 SUVs, engines idling. Not Madeline this time. Men in suits. Their silhouettes were rigid, purposeful. Too soon. Too coordinated. They knew I'd gone digging. I parked the truck, grabbed the folder, and stepped out. The tallest man approached first, sharp jawline, cold eyes. "Mr. Parker, we need to talk." "About what?" I asked. He offered a thin smile. "About land, about opportunity, about avoiding a very unpleasant situation." I recognized the voice from local business news. Greg Fenner, developer, investor, man with deep ties to Maple Canyon. He extended a hand I didn't take. "We have a proposal," he said. "One we think you'll find generous." Generous was never generous when it came this fast. Behind him, another man stepped forward and opened a leather portfolio. A check was clipped inside. A check with a number that made my stomach tighten. But it wasn't the money that alarmed me. It was the clause beneath it. Buyer assumes historical land lease obligations. Historical obligations? My uncle never signed a lease. There shouldn't be one. I met Fenner's eyes. "No." His smile faded. "Think carefully, Mr. Parker. You don't want enemies here." "I already have them," I said, "and they came with a gate." Fenner's jaw flexed. The man behind him closed the portfolio sharply. "We'll be in touch," Fenner said. "But next time the offer may not be as friendly." They left without another word. As their taillights disappeared down the road, I tightened my grip on the folder. The HOA wanted compliance. The developer wanted silence. The truth wanted daylight. Tomorrow, I'd find out what my uncle meant by "this land remembers," and why Maple Canyon was terrified of Parker ownership. But tomorrow came faster than expected. Before sunrise, I heard engines rolling up my driveway. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Not ranch trucks, not neighbors, vehicles that didn't belong on Parker land. I stepped onto the porch just as 3 black SUVs pulled up side by side, forming a wall across the gravel. This time there was no HOA volunteer or clipboard brigade. This time the men stepping out wore tailored suits, polished shoes, and faces carved from stone. At the center was Trent Holloway, the HOA attorney I'd heard whispers about, sharp as a scalpel, clean cut, and leaning on a confidence that reeked of entitlement. To his right stood Greg Fenner, the developer from last night, and then a third man I didn't recognize. Tall, older, with the stiff posture of someone used to giving orders without resistance. Fenner spoke first. "Mr. Parker, we hope to catch you before your day starts." "You don't hope," I said. "You plan." His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Trent stepped forward. "Let's make this efficient. Maple Canyon HOA made several administrative errors in the early years of development. We're prepared to settle those discrepancies privately." "Privately?" I repeated. "Your HOA trespassed onto my land for decades, built homes on it, and tried to fence me out yesterday. That's not a discrepancy. That's theft." Trent didn't flinch. Bold words from someone who hasn't reviewed the full historical context. "I reviewed enough." His eyes narrowed. "Then you understand why we're here." The tall, older man opened a slim leather case and handed me a file. I flipped it open. Inside was a revised purchase proposal, far higher than the offer Greg made last night, enough to make someone without attachment to the land walk away instantly, enough to make any reasonable person consider it. But I wasn't reasonable. I was a Parker, and my uncle had raised me to know the true value of land, not in dollars, but in legacy. Trent said, "We're offering substantially more than market value. All we ask is that you sign a transfer of ownership, immediate funds, immediate closure." "And what do I get?" I asked. "Freedom from a legal battle you can't win." he said smoothly. I stared at the contract, pretending to skim it, though my eyes were fixed on one sentence buried in the middle. Buyer assumes historical land lease obligations. A trap, a legal noose disguised as generosity. My uncle never leased anything, I said. Greg interrupted. No, but he agreed in principle. He agreed to nothing, I cut in. The older man stepped closer. Mr. Parker, let's not play games. Your deceased relative was difficult, obstinate. His refusal to collaborate caused years of unnecessary friction. You can avoid the same mistake. That did it. You have 10 seconds, I said, to get off my land. Trent exhaled through his nose. You misunderstand the gravity of this situation. No, I said. You misunderstand the gravity of mine. I folded the contract in half and handed it back to him with only 2 fingers, like a contaminated item. Bringing bigger checks doesn't make you right, I said, and bringing more men doesn't make you strong. Trent's jaw tightened. Greg's mask dropped. The tall man's eyes darkened. You're making an enemy of powerful people, Greg said. No, I replied calmly. You made me yours the moment you put a gate on my driveway. The older man stepped forward as if to intimidate me, but I didn't move. Not an inch. Trent nodded at him sharply, signaling restraint. Then he leaned in just enough that only I could hear him. Mr. Parker, there are things in your uncle's records that could complicate ownership. Old obligations, old debts. You don't want them resurfacing. I stared him down. Show me one document, just one, or shut up. His silence confirmed everything. They had nothing. They retreated to their SUVs, tension rising like heat off asphalt. But before climbing in, Trent turned back. We'll be back, he said, and the next conversation won't be an offer. The engines roared to life. Gravel spat behind their tires. The 3 SUVs disappeared down the road, leaving only dust and the faint smell of expensive cologne. I watched them go, fists clenched, breathing steady. Stakes had shifted. This wasn't about boundary confusion. This wasn't about compliance or community standards. This was about control, their control. And the Parker land was the single weak point they couldn't afford to lose. I walked back inside, pulled out the folder Ruby helped me organize, and spread the documents across the kitchen table. What I held wasn't just evidence. It was leverage. My uncle wasn't careless. He didn't ignore county notices. He didn't refuse to engage out of stubbornness. He preserved every scrap of correspondence for one reason. He wanted the next Parker to fight with knowledge, not fists. I needed backup. I reached for my phone and dialed the number Ruby had given me. Lydia Rowan answered on the second ring. Rowan Law. Ms. Rowan, I said. My name is Cole Parker. I think you're the only person in the state who can help me with a problem involving an HOA. She paused. Which HOA? Maple Canyon. A low whistle sounded through the receiver. That nest of hornets, what did they do? They built half their community on land that belongs to me. Another pause. Then a steel-threaded tone in her voice. I'll clear my schedule. How soon can you come in? Today. Bring everything, she said. Surveys, letters, deeds, anything your uncle left behind. If you're right about the boundaries, this isn't just a dispute. It's a structural collapse waiting to happen. After the call ended, I gathered every document, slipped them into a waterproof case, and set them by the door. Tonight, for the first time since arriving, I slept lightly, not out of fear, but out of purpose. Because now I understood the truth. The HOA wasn't fighting to enforce rules. They were fighting to survive. And tomorrow, when Lydia saw the red lines on my uncle's old paper, Maple Canyon's entire world would start to crack. But the HOA didn't wait until tomorrow. They hit back before sunrise. I woke to the rhythmic beeping of a tow truck reversing toward my barn. My boots hit the floor before I was fully awake. Outside, a flatbed truck idled beside my tractor, an old but perfectly functional John Deere, while two men in reflective vests circled it like vultures. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, crossing the yard fast. One man didn't even look up. "HOA violation. Non-compliant agricultural machinery stored within community sightlines." "This is a ranch," I said, stepping between them and the tractor. The second man held up a tablet displaying a digital notice stamped with the Maple Canyon HOA logo. "Order to relocate or impound." "That order isn't worth the ink it isn't printed on," I snapped. Madeline's voice drifted from behind me. "Actually, Mr. Parker, it is." I turned. She stood with her arms folded, wearing sunglasses, even though the sun hadn't fully risen. Behind her, two more board members snapped photos of my barn, fencing, even my porch, evidence for their fabricated violations. Madeline removed her sunglasses. "You chose not to cooperate yesterday. This is the result." "Touch that tractor," I warned, "and you'll be trespassing." Madeline smiled like that was exactly what she wanted me to say. "We believe this area falls under HOA jurisdiction." "And I believe you're digging your own grave," I said, "because in an hour, every document proving otherwise will be in a lawyer's hands." Her smile twitched. She motioned for the tow truck to retreat, but the damage was done. They'd come onto my land with the intent to confiscate my property. It wasn't enforcement. It was intimidation. The second the trucks pulled away, I locked up, grabbed the waterproof case, and drove straight to Lydia Rowan's office. Lydia greeted me at the door herself. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back, zero patience for theatrics. The kind of lawyer who made grown men apologize before she proved they were wrong. "Cole," she said, "come in. You brought everything?" "Yes," I said, dropping the folder on her conference table. "And the HOA isn't wasting time. They showed up before dawn today." She raised an eyebrow. "Did they?" I laid out the documents. The 1994 survey, letters from the county, my uncle's notes, the violation notices, photos of the gate, and the bogus contract with the buried clause Fenner tried to slip past me. Lydia didn't say a word for 10 straight minutes as she reviewed everything. When she finally spoke, her tone had changed. Colder, heavier. "They're in serious trouble," she said. "This survey isn't just an old map, it's a boundary record, and your uncle's notes confirm he never agreed to sell or lease. That means Maple Canyon's expansion is illegal." "Can I force them to remove the gate?" I asked. "Eventually," she said. "But that's not your win." "Then what is?" She tapped the survey's red boundary line. This is the bomb under their foundation. If every home past this line is sitting on Parker land, the HOA's authority evaporates. Every fine, every action, every rule they've enforced becomes void. "And the homeowners?" "Victims," Lydia said. "Of the HOA, of the developer, but not of you." I exhaled. The stakes were bigger than I imagined. These weren't just bullies. They were bullies standing on stolen ground. Lydia continued, "We're going to handle this very carefully. First step, formal notice of dispute. Second step, request county verification. Third step, injunction to freeze HOA operations on all Parker land." "Madeline won't accept that quietly," I said. "She won't have a choice." Before we could go further, Lydia's assistant poked her head into the room. Ms. Rowan? There's someone here asking to see Mr. Parker." "Who?" "HOA compliance inspector. Says it's urgent." Lydia's eyes sharpened. "Stall him." But the inspector muttered loud enough to hear. "He needs to sign these corrective orders today." Lydia looked at me. "Do you want to deal with him now or let me handle it?" "I'll do it." We stepped into the lobby where a nervous-looking man in a Maple Canyon jacket held a stack of forms almost as tall as his clipboard. "Mr. Parker," he said, throat tight, Your property has been flagged for non-compliant fencing, non-permitted livestock. I cut him off. My property isn't in your HOA. He swallowed hard. Our boundaries include... Lydia stepped between us. Your boundaries include nothing on this land. And if you attempt to deliver one more fraudulent notice, I will file a harassment claim with the county. He blinked rapidly. I'm just doing my job. Then go do it somewhere else, Lydia said, preferably outside the Parker boundary line. He left so fast he nearly forgot his clipboard. When the door closed, Lydia turned back to me. They're scared. That's good, I said. No, she corrected. Their fear means they're desperate. Desperate people make reckless decisions. She gathered the files again. Cole, I want you to go home and document everything. Photos, dates, times. If they step even 1 inch onto Parker land again, record it. We'll need a complete timeline. I can do that. And keep this handy. She slid a printed statement across the table. A written declaration that you deny HOA authority on your property. If they corner you, give them a copy, then walk away. I folded it and put it in my jacket. As I drove back, her words replayed in my head. Reckless decisions, desperation, power slipping through their fingers. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw exactly what she meant. Bright orange violation stickers had been slapped across my barn doors. A neon pink immediate action required sign hung from the fence. A notice flapped against my porch railing, with fines already listed. They'd even tagged my pickup truck windshield. Every sticker was dated within the last hour. A swarm attack. They knew I was in town. They knew I'd gotten legal help, and they were trying to bury me in fake paper before the real paper destroyed them. I peeled one sticker off the barn and held it to the light. It felt flimsy, cheap, rushed, not official, not even properly formatted. They were panicking. I spent the next 2 hours photographing every notice, tagging timestamps, organizing them into a file just as Lydia instructed. But the real escalation came when I checked the mailbox. Inside was a thick envelope from Maple Canyon HOA. I opened it carefully. Inside were 15 printed violations, a mandatory HOA compliance assessment, and a threat of legal action if I didn't attend a hearing at their clubhouse. They were trying to drag me into their arena. I laughed once, short, sharp, and tucked the envelope under my arm. The HOA wanted a war of paperwork? Fine. I had the only documents that mattered. When I stepped inside the ranch house and spread everything across the table again, I realized something. The HOA wasn't trying to enforce rules. They were trying to suffocate me under noise. Noise meant to distract me from the one truth they couldn't bury. Maple Canyon existed because my uncle let it exist, and I had no intention of letting it continue. Tonight, I would finish cataloging the evidence. Tomorrow, Lydia and I would bury their entire operation, one violation at a time. But before dawn even broke, Lydia called me, not with strategy, but with urgency. Cole, I need you at my office now, and bring that survey. Her tone told me everything. The battlefield had just shifted. I grabbed the 1994 survey, stuffed it into a plastic sleeve, and drove into town. The moment I entered her office, she motioned me straight into the conference room, where a massive topo map was projected onto the wall. The same red line from my uncle's drawing now glowed across a county GIS map, accurate, scalable, layered with road networks and parcel information. And what it revealed took the air out of my lungs. Lydia tapped her laser pointer on the only paved road leading into Maple Canyon, the winding strip of asphalt I'd driven 1,000 times growing up. Cole, Maple Canyon Road sits entirely on Parker land, every inch of it. I stared at it. You're saying they've been trespassing to access their own homes since day one. A silence, heavy, electric, settled across the room. Then Lydia added, and the HOA never filed for an easement, not temporary, not permanent, Nothing. My uncle's voice floated back to me like a ghost. The land remembers. Suddenly it made sense why Madeline had panicked at the name Parker, why Trent tried to throw money at me, why they flooded me with bogus violations. They weren't worried about the ranch. They were terrified of the road. Lydia pulled up county documentation. Look here. The developer should have filed an easement application in 1997. It was never approved, not even submitted, meaning the road doesn't legally exist. And if the road isn't legal, I said slowly, neither is access to anything built beyond it. Lydia nodded. And that gives you leverage no landowner ever dreams of having. I sank into the chair. This wasn't just a dispute. This was the linchpin of their entire existence. What would happen, I asked carefully, if access was restricted? Lydia folded her arms. Cole, understand me clearly. You cannot block the road. That would trap families who don't deserve this mess. I'm not planning to block it, I said. But I sure as hell won't let the HOA keep pretending they own it. She exhaled hard. Good, because there's a smarter path. She zoomed in on the road again. You could lease or sell access rights, legally, on your terms, to whoever you want. And the HOA couldn't stop it. No, she said, they absolutely could not. The weight of possibility settled in my chest. The HOA wanted to drown me in paperwork? Fine. But now I had something better. Control, Lydia continued. Before you decide anything, I recommend we get the county land surveyor to verify everything. Once we have official confirmation, we send a cease and desist to Maple Canyon. And after that? Her lips curled just slightly. After that, they'll come crawling. My phone buzzed then. A number I didn't recognize. I put it on speaker. Mr. Parker? A clipped voice asked. This is Greg Fenner. I'd like to discuss yesterday's misunderstanding. Lydia mouthed, Don't answer questions. What do you want, Greg? To find a mutually beneficial arrangement regarding your land. Specifically, the north boundary adjacent to the residential development. You mean the community built on Parker land? The man hesitated. Let's not make this adversarial. You showed up with a fake offer and a predatory contract. Fenner's tone hardened. I'd advise caution, Mr. Parker. You don't want unnecessary conflict with people who've invested millions in Maple Canyon. Then maybe they should have invested in a legal survey. A beat. Then he ended the call. Lydia grinned. He just confirmed he's scared. Excellent. But the day wasn't done shifting. We drove back to the ranch so Lydia could inspect the road personally. As her SUV crept down the narrow asphalt, she took photographs, GPS coordinates, and timestamps. When we passed the Maple Canyon sign, she stopped the car. Look at that, she murmured. Their monument is sitting 8 feet across your boundary line. The HOA had literally planted their identity on stolen soil. We continued up the hill to the ridge overlooking the valley. Lydia stepped out, surveyed the entire development, and shook her head. It's surreal, she whispered. 200 homes depending on a road they don't own. They're going to lose their minds when they find out. Oh, they'll do worse than that, Lydia said. They'll fight you with everything they have. The HOA board, the attorney, the developer, and the homeowners? She paused. Once they learn the truth, most of them will turn on the HOA. But for now, expect hostility. We headed back down the hill. Behind us, Maple Canyon glimmered with its artificial lakes, uniform rooftops, and the illusion of order. But underneath, chaos waiting to happen. When Lydia left for the day, I immediately pulled out my laptop and looked up the wildfire response company that operated in the next county, Big Sky Logistics. I remembered my uncle telling me once they'd been trying for years to establish emergency routes across these ridges. A private company that needed access through Parker land, a company with deep pockets, a company completely outside HOA jurisdiction. I drafted an email. Subject: Proposal for exclusive access road lease from Cole Parker to Operations Director, Big Sky Logistics. I kept it short, direct, professional. Within 3 hours, they replied, Mr. Parker, we are very interested. Can we schedule an on-site evaluation tomorrow morning? My heartbeat kicked up. This wasn't blocking the road. This was transferring authority over it, legally, permanently, without a single violation notice required. As evening fell, I stepped outside and faced the distant glow of Maple Canyon's streetlights. They thought they were tightening the noose. They didn't realize the rope was tied to their own foundations. Tomorrow, Big Sky Logistics would walk the road. And if everything checked out, Maple Canyon would wake up to a new reality. Their entire kingdom depended on a road I no longer intended to own. And the HOA wouldn't be able to do a damn thing about it. By 7 a.m., Big Sky Logistics convoy rolled up my driveway. 2 white trucks, a utility van, and an engineer named Carl Jensen, who looked like he'd walked straight out of a FEMA briefing. Clipboard, vest, steel-toed boots. Zero small talk. Mr. Parker, we'll need full access to the road, start to finish. I unlocked the ranch gate. You'll get more than that. They drove ahead, and I followed in my pickup. The moment we reached Maple Canyon Road, Carl's expression shifted from neutral to calculating. This is perfect, he said. Minimal grade, clean sightlines, wide enough for emergency vehicles. You realize how rare that is out here? Rare enough to be worth something? I asked. Carl smirked. Oh, this is worth a lot. While his team began measuring, mapping, and stress testing the pavement, I watched the neighborhood waking up beyond the ridge. Early morning dog walkers, joggers, sprinklers kicking on in neat rows. Every one of them taking for granted the single strip of asphalt connecting them to the outside world. They had no idea it didn't belong to them. Not yet. 30 minutes into the evaluation, a familiar SUV screeched up beside us, the black one Greg Fenner always rode in. He lowered the window, fury wrapped in a fake smile. Cole, morning, he said, voice strained. Mind explaining why there's a construction crew on Maple Canyon Road? Carl stepped forward. We're evaluating this road for federal wildfire access. Greg blinked. Federal? This is a private community road. Carl checked his clipboard. Not according to the county plot. This entire stretch is deeded to the Parker Ranch. Greg's face drained. There must be a mistake. No mistake, Carl said. We cross-check these things. Greg looked at me, voice dropping into threat. Cole, stop whatever this is. Madeline won't tolerate interference with community access. She doesn't own the road, I said. And neither do you. Greg tried to hide the panic under a thin veil of confidence. If you make this adversarial, you'll force consequences neither of us wants. Funny, Monte said. That's exactly the line your attorney fed me. The thin veil dropped. Greg backed off and peeled away toward the HOA clubhouse. Carl whistled. That guy knows he's cooked. Not yet, I said. But he will. By noon, Carl had completed his assessment. He shook my hand, with the enthusiasm of a man who found treasure. Mr. Parker, Big Sky Logistics formally offers a multi-year lease granting us exclusive control of this road. Our legal team can have the paperwork ready this afternoon. What kind of terms? $2 million up front, annual renewal options, and we cover all maintenance. $2 million. For a road the HOA pretended belonged to them. Send me the paperwork, I said. Carl radioed his team, and within hours my inbox held a finalized contract. Lydia reviewed every clause, every line. This is airtight, she said. Once you sign, the HOA loses all authority over this road. Forever. Do they have any legal recourse? I asked. No, she said. Not even theoretical. At 4:17 p.m., I signed. At 4:18 p.m., Big Sky Logistics owned the only entrance to Maple Canyon. And the next morning, the entire valley woke up to the consequences. Dawn broke with clanging metal and hydraulic drills as Big Sky crews installed an ID checkpoint at the road entrance. Security booth, steel posts, retractable barrier arm. Their men worked fast and efficient, like they'd done this 100 times. By 7:02 a.m., the first Maple Canyon resident drove down, an older man in a Mercedes. He slowed at the booth, confused. The guard stepped forward. "Morning, sir. This road is now private access. May I see your authorization?" "Authorization? I live here," the man said, baffled. "I understand," the guard replied, "but Maple Canyon HOA no longer holds easement rights. Please contact Big Sky Logistics for a temporary access permit." The man stared like he'd been hit with a shovel. Within 10 minutes, a line of luxury vehicles, BMWs, Teslas, Range Rovers, backed up along the road, horns blaring. Some residents argued, some shouted, some called Madeline. Then her Range Rover appeared. She stormed out, hair unbrushed, robe tied over pajamas, like she had sprinted straight from bed the second the first complaint came in. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped at the guard. The guard remained professional. "Ma'am, this is a restricted access route under the control of Big Sky Logistics." "This road belongs to Maple Canyon," she barked. I stepped into view. "Actually, it doesn't. Never did." Madeline froze. Then her eyes narrowed with the venom of someone who realizes her world is catching fire. "You," she hissed. "You did this." "You brought this on yourself," I said. "For 20 years, you've used a road you never owned." "You can't trap 200 families," she shouted. "No one's trapped," I replied. "They just have to follow the rules of the people who legally control the property they're driving on. Isn't that how HOA logic works?" Residents began surrounding her, demanding answers. "Madeline, what's going on? Why didn't you tell us about this? You said the HOA maintained the road. Is this legal?" She raised her voice to regain control. "Everyone calm down. The sheriff will fix this." Right on cue, Deputy Carson Briggs arrived. He approached slowly, took in the checkpoint, the contracts, the documentation the guard provided, and then shook his head. "Madeline," he said, "nothing illegal is happening here." She recoiled as if slapped. "What?" "This is a private road on private land," Briggs said. "The sheriff's office can't override a lawful lease agreement." "But they're blocking us." "No," Briggs corrected. "They're enforcing property rights, which you," he pointed lightly at her, "have no claim to." Gasps spread through the crowd. Madeline's composure shattered. Her voice cracked. "You can't do this, Cole. You can't just sell our road." "It's not your road," I said. "It never was." Her eyes filled with rage. Not sadness, not fear, just pure indignation that someone she viewed as beneath her had outmaneuvered her. Residents began shouting again. "This is your fault, Madeline. You told us the HOA owned everything past the monument. Did you know about this? You better fix this." Madeline turned on them. "Everyone stop!" But her authority evaporated. In that moment, she was no longer HOA president, just a woman standing on land she didn't own, trying to control people she no longer had power over. The crowd dispersed in chaos. Some demanded access permits, some called news stations, some threatened lawsuits, and Madeline stumbled toward her SUV, shaking, humiliated. Before she climbed in, she whispered toward me, not loud, but sharp enough to cut bone. "You've made a very powerful enemy, Mr. Parker." I leaned in. "No," I said. "I've exposed a very weak one." Her face crumpled. She floored the gas and vanished up the hill. But Big Sky's checkpoint remained, and Maple Canyon's illusion of control died on that road, just like I planned. Because tomorrow, the real evidence would surface, and that's when the HOA would finally face consequences they couldn't outrun. By the time the sun climbed over the ridge, Maple Canyon had already entered full-scale meltdown. Cars piled along the roadside. Residents bickered at the new checkpoint. Big Sky guards repeated the same line over and over. Private road, authorization required. And every frustrated shout, every angry demand, every panicked phone call funneled into one person. Madeline Sharp. Deputy Carson Briggs pulled up in his cruiser again. This time because Madeline had called claiming unlawful detainment of HOA residents. The moment he stepped out, 3 homeowners rushed him at once. "Deputy, they're blocking our road. They're discriminating against us. This is kidnapping." Briggs held up his hands. "Nobody is being detained. Nobody is under arrest. This is civil, not criminal." He motioned for me to step forward. "Mr. Parker," he said, "would you mind confirming for these folks what you told me yesterday?" I kept my voice even. "Maple Canyon Road sits on Parker Ranch land. Always has." Briggs nodded. "The sheriff's office has reviewed the deeds. Big Sky Logistics now legally controls this road through a valid lease agreement. That means—" Madeline cut him off, screeching, "That means nothing! They cannot block a public residential community from accessing their homes." Briggs stayed calm, which only made her angrier. "Ma'am," he said, "this was never a public road. The HOA never filed for easement. Legally, you've been trespassing for decades." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, then outrage. "You told us the road belonged to the HOA. You said dues were covering maintenance. Did you lie to us? Is that why our fees went up every year?" Madeline wavered, sweat gathering at her temples despite the cold air. "This is a misunderstanding," she managed. "Greg and Trent will fix it." A woman near the front shouted, "Where are they?" Everyone turned. Good question. Greg Fenner's black SUV rolled in a moment later, but instead of exiting with his usual swagger, he stepped out cautiously, eyeing the cameras pointed his way. News crews had begun arriving, drawn by chatter of a wealthy HOA losing access to its own neighborhood. Madeline rushed to him. "Greg, do something!" Greg straightened his jacket and addressed the crowd like a politician facing scandal. "Listen, everyone, Maple Canyon is working closely with our legal counsel to resolve a property discrepancy. There's no need for panic." Someone yelled back, "We can't get to work." Another shouted, "My kids are late for school." And another, voice trembling, "My mother has dialysis at 8. Greg faltered, "We are coordinating alternate arrangements." But the guards were unmoved. Their orders were contracts, not sympathy. In the middle of this chaos, a county sedan pulled up. Ruby Hale stepped out, holding a thin folder. She looked straight at me. "Cole," she said, "we need to talk." Madeline snapped, "If that's about the bogus survey, we're done listening." Ruby raised a hand. "Ma'am, this isn't about the survey." Her tone made everyone quiet. She opened the folder and revealed the top page, a map stamped with county seals and signatures. "This," Ruby said, "is the original 1998 boundary expansion request filed by Maple Canyon HOA." Madeline stiffened. Greg went pale. But Ruby didn't stop. "This document was never approved. It was never even presented to the county council. And more importantly," she tapped the map, "the person who signed the verification page was your HOA president." Every head turned toward Madeline. Ruby looked at her evenly. "Your signature, Ms. Sharp." Madeline's jaw clenched. That's forged. I never saw that before." Ruby took out the second page, a handwriting comparison analysis, county certified. "Your signature matches in 15 out of 16 metrics," Ruby said. "Someone didn't want the county to know Maple Canyon was expanding onto land the HOA didn't own." Gasps, whispers, shouts. "You lied to us? You built on someone else's ranch? This is fraud! We trusted you!" Madeline tried to recover, but now she wasn't yelling. She was pleading. I didn't do this. Greg, tell them we didn't. Greg stepped back, hands up. Madeline, I had no part in your filings. Coward. Ruby turned to me. Cole, that isn't the important part. She handed me the last sheet. A voicemail transcript. Trent Holloway. Threatening me. Threatening litigation. Threatening to bury Parker claims forever. Ruby said quietly, We pulled this from county complaint records. Lydia already has a copy. Madeline's knees nearly buckled. The crowd erupted again, but now it wasn't chaos. It was fury. We want a meeting. Everyone in the clubhouse, now! She owes us answers. What did she hide? How long has this been going on? Madeline looked around wildly, cornered from every direction. Her voice broke. You can't do this to me. But the residents weren't listening anymore. They were marching toward the clubhouse, toward the truth, toward the ruin of the HOA they once believed protected them. Briggs leaned over to me. Cole, whatever happens in that meeting, you didn't just shake the hornet's nest. He looked at Madeline, lost, trembling, defeated. You blew the whole damn hive apart. I exhaled. Not victory, not yet. But the ground was shifting, and Maple Canyon was finally realizing the truth. The HOA didn't own the land. They didn't own the road. They didn't own the valley. They didn't own anything at all. Tomorrow, Lydia and I would finish what my uncle started. The courtroom would hear everything, and for the first time in years, Parker Land would speak. The clubhouse filled faster than I expected. Homeowners flooded in, faces twisted with anger, betrayal, confusion, an entire community realizing the people they trusted had built their lives on lies. Lydia stood beside me at the front, calm, composed, a stack of documents in her arms like ammunition. At the back of the room, Madeline Sharp looked shattered. Her hair was disheveled, her blouse wrinkled, her authority gone. Greg Fenner lurked by the wall, silent and pale, already working on his escape plan. Trent Holloway was nowhere to be found. Good. His absence would speak louder than anything he could have said. Lydia clicked the projector on. A giant image of the 1994 Parker survey filled the wall. Bright red boundary lines slicing straight through Maple Canyon like a wound. Gasps erupted across the room. This, Lydia began, is the original recorded survey of the Parker Ranch. It predates the formation of Maple Canyon HOA by 6 years. And as you can see, she pointed a laser toward the screen, the HOA development is built entirely on Parker land. Not partially, not debatably, entirely. She changed slides. A copy of the 1998 boundary expansion request appeared, stamped with the county seal and a rejection notice. This document, she continued, was filed with the county but never approved. Yet the HOA built as if it were. The falsified version, she tapped the next slide, showing Madeline's signature, was used internally to justify expansion. Shouting erupted. You lied to us! You took our money! You misled every homeowner here! My property value! What happens now? Madeline stumbled forward, voice shaking. It wasn't like that. I didn't know. I was told. Told by who? A man yelled. All eyes turned to Greg. He raised his hands defensively. Hey, no, I wasn't part of any of this. I just fund projects. Legal filings aren't my department. Lydia arched an eyebrow. Interesting. Because according to the county's financial logs, you paid the engineering consultant who drafted the falsified map. Greg froze. The room erupted again, this time angrier, louder, more chaotic. A woman shouted, I paid HOA dues for 8 years. Where did that money go? Another yelled, You promised road improvements that never happened. A third, voice cracking, My husband and I bought our home believing you owned this land. Lydia raised a hand. Silence. Heavy and tense. There is more, she said. You all deserve to hear the full truth. She pressed play on the tablet in her hand. A recording played out of the speakers. Trent Holloway's voice, unmistakable, dripping arrogance. Cole needs to back off. If he pushes this, we'll bury the map, bury the claim, bury him in litigation. Tell Madeline not to worry. We'll stall everything long enough to get the expansion finalized under the table. Dead silence. No yelling. No whispering. Just a collective moment of disbelief. Then the dam broke. That's illegal. He threatened him. Madeline, how long have you covered this up? How deep does this go? My God, were we ever told the truth about anything? Madeline dissolved into tears. I didn't know what else to do. They said the HOA would collapse. Greg said we'd lose everything. Trent told me Parker heirs never come back. And then she looked at me. Truly looked. You weren't supposed to show up, she whispered. There it was. The truth behind her panic the first day I arrived. She thought the Parker name was gone, that the land lay unprotected, that no one would ever challenge them. She was wrong. Lydia spoke again, strong and clear. The evidence of fraud, boundary violations, and misrepresentation will be presented in full before Judge Hathaway tomorrow morning. Residents turned toward me, not with anger, but with a kind of stunned hope. A man in the second row stood. Cole, what happens to us? I didn't sugarcoat it. Your homes were built on my family's land, I said. You were lied to, but I'm not here to punish families. You didn't do this. They did. I pointed at Madeline, at Greg, at the empty seat where Trent should have been. People whispered, some relieved, some skeptical, all desperate for clarity. Lydia continued, Tomorrow's hearing will determine temporary control, development rights, and restitution. But understand, Cole Parker is not seeking eviction or disruption of families. He is seeking the lawful correction of a decades-long fraud. A woman near the front covered her face, crying, not from fear this time, but relief. Then someone spoke from the doorway. Cole! Deputy Briggs stepped forward, holding a fresh report. Judge Hathaway reviewed the emergency filing I delivered earlier, he said, and she issued something you're going to want to see. He handed Lydia the document. She scanned it, expression widening. This is an emergency injunction, she announced. Effective immediately, Maple Canyon HOA is prohibited from enforcing any rules, collecting any dues, or managing any part of this community until the court hearing. Shouts erupted. Some cheered, some cursed, some simply collapsed into chairs, overwhelmed by everything unraveling at once. Madeline whispered, broken, This can't be happening. But it was, and it was only the beginning. Lydia lowered the injunction. Tomorrow, she said, we bring everything to court. Every map, every filing, every lie. I stepped forward one last time. Your HOA tried to bury the truth, I said. But the land remembered. My uncle remembered. And now all of you know the truth too. Residents nodded slowly, one by one. Not at the HOA president anymore. At me. At the man whose land they'd lived on for years, and whose justice they now depended on. The meeting ended with the weight of a community bracing for impact. Tomorrow wasn't just a court date. It would be the day Maple Canyon finally heard the verdict of the land it had stolen. And I knew exactly what that land would say. The courthouse in Helena was already buzzing when Lydia and I stepped inside. Reporters hovered near the entrance, cameras angled toward the doors, waiting for the HOA's walk of shame. Homeowners filled the hallways, angry, exhausted, clutching folders of dues statements and emails. They weren't here to fight me. They were here because they'd finally learned who the real enemy was. At 8:57 a.m., Madeline Sharp entered. She looked small. Not physically. She still carried herself with the rigid posture of someone clinging to authority, but small in presence. Shrunk, drowned in the weight of what she'd been hiding. Greg followed behind her, jaw clenched, refusing eye contact with anyone. And Trent, he appeared last, sweating, disheveled, carrying a briefcase that looked too thin to save him. Judge Hathaway entered the courtroom at precisely 9:02. A woman in her 60s, sharp eyes, voice like gravel and truth. "Be seated," she said. Everyone obeyed immediately. Lydia wasted no time. She placed the stack of documents on the evidence table with a thud that echoed off the walls. "Your Honor," she began, "this case centers on decades of fraudulent land use, false filings, and the illegal expansion of Maple Canyon HOA onto Parker Ranch land without authorization." Judge Hathaway held up a hand. "I've reviewed your emergency filings. Proceed." Lydia clicked the projector remote. Judge Hathaway studied the 1994 Parker survey, then the 1998 boundary request, then the falsified map bearing Madeline's signature. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, as if each line revealed another layer of rot. "Ms. Sharp," the judge said, "approach." Madeline stood, trembling. "Did you sign this?" A long silence. Madeline's lower lip trembled. I was told it was a routine internal document. I didn't know, Judge Hathaway slammed her gavel once. "Do not lie to this court." Madeline flinched. She swallowed. "I signed it." Whispers spread across the courtroom. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Unbelievable." Greg tried to stand. "Your Honor, if I may clarify." "You may sit," Hathaway said coldly. "Your time will come." Next came the audio recording of Trent Holloway's voicemail. His voice boomed through the speakers. "We'll bury the map, bury the claim, bury him." Trent tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a look that could flatten concrete. When the audio ended, Hathaway leaned forward. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "have you ever heard of prosecutorial misconduct?" Trent's face drained. "Your Honor," he stammered, "this was taken out of context. Were you or were you not threatening to manipulate legal filings?" "No, I didn't mean—" "Sit down." He sat. Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Parker, you've requested injunctive relief. What is it you seek from this court?" I stood, clear, steady, prepared. "Your Honor, I seek recognition that Parker Ranch is the rightful owner of the land Maple Canyon occupies. I also request dissolution of the HOA's authority over my property, restitution for trespass, and permission to negotiate future land sales directly with homeowners." Judge Hathaway nodded. "Understood." She turned to the crowd, the homeowners who'd been dragged into this mess. "You have all been misled," she said, "by those who swore to represent your interests, not by Mr. Parker." Homeowners murmured among themselves. Some looked relieved, others furious, all of them waiting for the blow they knew was coming. Hathaway lifted the injunction order. "This court finds by overwhelming evidence that Maple Canyon HOA has operated illegally outside its established boundaries since its inception. Their filings were falsified, their expansion unauthorized, their enforcement invalid." Her gavel struck the bench. "Therefore, Maple Canyon HOA is hereby dissolved in its current capacity. All authority over Parker Ranch land reverts to Mr. Parker. The HOA board members, Ms. Sharp, Mr. Fenner, and Mr. Holloway, are referred for criminal investigation into fraud and land misrepresentation. Restitution will be determined in a separate hearing." Chaos broke loose. Some homeowners applauded. Some cried. Relief, anger, vindication all tangled together. Greg yelled at his attorney. Trent buried his face in his hands. Madeline whispered something like a prayer or a curse. But the noise faded the moment Judge Hathaway raised her voice again. "One more thing." Silence. "Mr. Parker?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You showed restraint where others would have pursued destruction. I expect you to maintain that standard as you move forward." I nodded. "I will." Court adjourned. Court. Outside the courthouse, the wind carried the sound of clicking cameras and scattered questions, but I ignored all of it. I stepped aside with Lydia as homeowners gathered around us, not angry this time, but lost, needing direction. A father approached me first. "What happens to us now, Cole? Do we lose our homes?" "No," I said firmly. "No one's losing their home." A hush spread. "You were lied to, but not by me. Starting next week, I'll meet with residents who want to secure legitimate land ownership. Fair contracts, fair prices, no tricks, no hidden fees." The man nodded slowly, shoulders loosening. Another homeowner stepped forward. "Why are you doing this? After everything they put you through?" I looked at the valley stretching out behind the courthouse, the mountains my uncle loved, the land he protected until his last breath. "Because the land deserved better," I said, "and so do the people living on it." Lydia rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Cole." "No," I said softly. "The land did. I just listened." That evening, I returned to the ridge overlooking the entire 840 acres. The sun dipped behind the pines, casting long shadows across the valley. For the first time since I arrived, the ranch felt calm, whole, like it recognized me. I whispered to the wind, almost instinctively, "Uncle, I kept the land." A single breath of warm air swept across my shoulders, rustling the sagebrush, and for the first time since he passed, I felt like he heard me. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But it came. And it stayed. Because the land remembers its owner. And now, so did everyone else. If you've ever stood your ground against something unfair, drop a simple "justice" in the comments so I know you're out there. And if stories about dignity, grit, and fighting back the right way speak to you, go on and subscribe. I've got more true-to-the-bone tales coming your way.